Hello, everyone. Welcome to another, should I call it an episode, another live stream. This is number 6 of Doctors on Social Media Teach podcasting. I love doing this, guys. Seriously, this is so much fun for me. And I am so excited for our guests who are going to be coming on. But remember, holistically, this whole thing is about learning how to podcast. Now, with all the craziness in the world going on, everything is heading to digital media, which is an important asset for literally anyone who wants to develop themselves individually. Maybe it's a brand, maybe it's a business. There's so much that you can do. Maybe it's your own personal interest to learn an idea or a concept. But I believe that having a strong podcast is almost an essential skill potentially for anyone who wants to grow themselves or their business or their brand and learn some amazing stuff. It really is just an awesome process. So I can't talk about it enough. It's been life-changing for me. I'm sure it's also changed my guests who are coming on today. Before we head over and I introduce everyone, I just want to start by saying that this is hosted by Doctors on Social Media, and SoMeDocs offers many packages, including learning resources like podcasts or learning how to create different courses or content creation. So there's so much to learn about building out a business, and this is not going to be all encompassing. So if you guys want to learn more, please check out somedocs.com or doctorsonsocialmedia.com. And let's get into our content for today. Today, the episode or the series that we're going to focus on for today is going to be how do you create engaging media or content off of your podcast? So you have your podcast, but how do you create engaging media, not just in the podcast, but afterwards? What are we doing with that process? So first and foremost, I'm going to welcome on our first guest. We got the amazing Alopi Patel. Alopi is a dual board certified anesthesiologist and pain medicine physician. Her pain practice focuses on women's health, including pelvic pain, fibromyalgia, migraines, and more. Dr. Patel practices in New York City and is actively engaged in clinical research, academic leadership positions, and advocacy in the field of anesthesiology. She has presented at national conferences and continues to give lectures within her institution, as well as conferences on topics in the field of pain medicine and anesthesiology. Dr. Alopi Patel, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And we're going to head over to the great and wonderful Mira. Mira Kirapacker, MD, is a dual board certified anesthesiologist and pain medicine physician. Her pain practice focuses on women's health and women's pain with a focus on pelvic pain, particularly interventional techniques for pelvic pain. Dr. Mira practices in New York City and is actively engaged in clinical research, including serving on the board of prominent pain journal, advocacy in the field of anesthesiology, and resident and fellow education. She continues to present at national conferences and gives lectures within her institution in the field of pain medicine and anesthesiology. Thank you, Mira, for being on.
Excited to be here.
Awesome. And look, so before we get into the show for today, you guys actually co-host together, correct?
We do.
So tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did you guys get started?
During the pandemic, we just had a little more time. We had been kind of talking about it for a while. Like I think we had been talking about doing something related to women's pain because it's such an underserved area. It's such an under-recognized area of medicine, and we wanted to do something that was focused on women's pain in particular, but for both potential just women in general, like patients and also colleagues, to kind of be educational for both. And during the pandemic, when we had a little more time, we kind of had a chance to slow down a little and talked about it and kind of stumbled upon this idea of doing a podcast on those topics. And since then, we've sort of branched to talk about not just women's pain, but women's health related topics as well.
Yeah. And I feel like if I think about it, it's not an often talked about topic in general, even through my own medical training, and going through the process. And specifically, as you guys are the masters of this, there's women specific topics that no one's really touching on. So I think that's really great that you guys have found that niche. Before we head over, though, I'm going to play our introduction video. All right, so the topic is creating engaging material or content through the podcast. So I'm going to field it over to Alope first. What are your thoughts about the importance of creating engaging content?
So first, I want to talk about how we actually came across it. And it was because, like Mira said, with women's health, we wanted to create an area where we can focus the light on women's health. And during the pandemic, when people were moving more towards digital content and social media to get a lot of their information, we realized the value of not just talking about women's health, but also creating a platform to amplify what we wanted to talk about. And that's how essentially we came across podcasting. And podcasting is great. I mean, it's a great way to get our message out there, but just like anything else, it doesn't mean as much if you can't amplify that. And that's, again, how we kind of came across social media. And there are so many different social media platforms that are available to amplify our voices about something that we're both very passionate about and we practice on a daily basis. So the importance of this is really to reach as many people as we possibly can about a topic that is very under-recognized, and to create more sort of avenues for people to reach that information. So although we were very naive physicians who were, kind of engaging in this world and just kind of, dipping our toes in the water of social media and podcasting, we very quickly recognized that we had to utilize many different social media platforms, whether that was Instagram, even TikTok. We've used a lot of TikTok as well as Facebook to really get to as many patients and people and personnel to really amplify the message that we wanted our audience to hear.
Yeah, that's great. And Mira, any other additional thoughts on that?
I mean, one of the biggest things that we realized is, what is the good in having a podcast if no one knows about it and no one knows how to listen to it? No one knows that it exists in the first place. And using social media is really what drove home that point, because as soon as we started posting more on social media, creating more content on there, directing to listen to a full episode on the podcast for more information, our listenership massively increased. And it's just very important to be able to reach as many people as possible, to drive them to listen to more information, the information that you spent a lot of time and energy creating, to make sure that it is accurate information that you're dispelling. You're dispelling myths that are all over the internet that are completely false about your topic. And you're really trying to, educate as much as you can. And you can't do that without having people actually listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have such an important topic. And to find those methods and ways to express that, you use the word amplify, which I think is the right word there. Finding the right method of taking that microphone and then amplifying it to all of these areas is just so important. And and you also mentioned all of the different social media channels that you guys are using to do this. So I guess a question on top of this is, are you using all of the social media channels equivalently? Do you have any method of sort of getting it out into the world? I guess I'll start with you, Mira, first on this. What are your methods or ways to amplify?
I would say that when we first started, we kind of tried to use, most platforms. Like, we tried to sort of use as many as possible, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, Clubhouse had launched, Twitter, like trying to use as much as Facebook, as much as possible. One, that can be difficult to sustain. And two, I think using all of those helped us realize which ones were most valuable for us, ones that kind of we had the most engagement with. And that is essentially what led us to then pare down to which ones we primarily wanted to use. So it's not that we don't use the others, but I would say we use Instagram as our most commonly used one, biggest one, where we kind of make sure to keep up on it and post very regularly. And the other ones we use a little bit more, but we still use them. But you just have to kind of pick and choose in order to be able to most valuably use your time.
So to summarize, essentially what you're saying is you first tried a lot of them and then you saw where the engagement was, and then you pared down on kind of the sort of top methods.
Right.
Anything else
Right.
to add to that, Lopi?
So I think it also, like Mira mentioned, came down to where what type of audience was really listening to it. So for us, it was we started off with mostly pelvic pain and women's health. And most of the patients that we see are usually in a younger sort of group, 20s, 30s, 40s. And although we kind of threw everything kind of out there to see what would stick, we realized we were getting the most information out to the people that wanted to hear what we wanted to say via Instagram. And that's just based on, the usage and the age of the people that use Instagram. And then after that, it was TikTok. So we post the same content both on Instagram and TikTok to get the most bang for our buck, essentially. And we had more engagement on Instagram, so we continued with that. And then we also tried Twitter and Clubhouse, but we realized that each of those have different consumers, essentially, of healthcare information. So to really get the most valuable information out on the best platform, we focused on Instagram.
So in essence, you guys took the approach of almost like grassroots marketing research. You kind of tested the waters and then figured out where the engagement was. And I think that's a really great approach. And on top of it, what you're saying is you have to be specific to your audience. So for example, if you have a bunch of elderly listeners, or your goal is to hit that population, you might want to think of more so hitting like articles or magazines or things that are more materially based. Whereas if you're hitting the younger crowd, maybe you're hitting TikTok or Instagram. And then again, like it just really depends. Or do your people hang on Twitter? Do your people hang on, again, it's all these different areas. And so for you guys, it sounds like Instagram and TikTok were the ones that really hit it. Let's head over to the next point, which is, okay, so you've put some stuff out and you've tested the waters. Have you guys noticed a pattern in content that is being more engaged with on these various platforms? So like Alopi, for you, like, have you guys found any methods or do you guys have a method to your creativity or your thinking around production of content?
So I love that you previously mentioned marketing, because we started off as just thinking of ourselves as physicians who wanted to be podcasters, but we've also become marketing experts, but not really. We're always growing. And we quickly realized that we couldn't just put out data or content. I mean, we had to analyze how it was being consumed. And that's how we got to Instagram. And on Instagram, we realized that a lot of our content was best consumed in the form of reels, and reels really became popular over the last year or so. And that's what we started focusing on. So creating engaging reels and basically getting the most information out in the shortest period of time was another thing that we noticed. Reels that were less than 10 seconds often did better than reels that were longer. So we mostly focused on reels. We also cross post on Facebook. We upload to stories every time we post any sort of reels as well. So really analyzing where most people were getting the information. And we've analyzed that by likes for one, but also views and comments. And a lot of the reels were really the best engaged sort of content that we put out.
And for those who do not know, reels are just the Instagram form of short clips that can be replayable. It's similar to TikTok that also has short clips. And society, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, is having shorter and shorter attention spans, which means that we have to sort of pack in a ton of information into short bursts. And it's also really entertaining. And then I guess I'll take this over to Mira. Mira, like, are you having fun creating these reels? Like, What mischievousness are you getting up to when you guys are creating all this stuff?
Yeah, they are fun. I mean, it's definitely more fun to me to create a reel than to necessarily like write out a big article about something. So the way that we do it is, we'll create a reel on whatever the topic is, keeping it very short, like Alpi mentioned. We both try to keep it ideally less than 10 seconds, at most less than 15 seconds. And then having more of the information, if you're kind of missing something in that reel, in like a kind of like a mini blog post as your description. So that way you still get out all of the information that you're trying to, and directing for, more information to your podcast, but you're still getting out the rest of it, but you have a small burst that everyone can look at. And with the reels, you really, or any kind of video, it's boring if you're just speaking and that's it. So it really has to be a lot of like, your background has to be something that's catchier. Your music has to be something that's catchier. And typically with the music, we kind of look to see what are more of the trending, if you will, music on TikTok or Instagram, and try to use that music, because automatically it ends up being shown to more, just based off of the algorithm that Instagram and TikTok, for example, use. You end up getting that out more because you've used the most trendy music and you used like a fun background, and you're not just, it's not dry, it's more entertaining. And so those are all important things to factor in.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting and important, because especially when you first start, you're like, oh, like this is a little scary, but I'll put this out into the world and see what happens. And I learned this, I'm sure you guys learned this too. If you just put stuff out there, you're actually not going to get many people to watch. So there's this fear that like, okay, I put this thing out in the world, now millions of people are going to watch you. And the reality is it's like, 10 to 15 people maybe that see certain things, until you start to engage with the material, right, like you're talking about, hopping onto trends, coming up with something creative, maybe something hits a little bit, gets more virality, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Are you guys, I'm curious, are you guys finding it fun to do all this stuff? Or at times are you, because I run into this myself, like it's fun for creation, but also it can get tedious and you can also get potentially more burnt out. So have you guys found that like balancing point of creation but not making it work, so to speak?
We have. I think it took time. Initially, we were very ambitious to get as much information and create as much content as possible. And like you said, there's a balance, because it can be tedious, it's time consuming, you have to constantly be inspired to create content, edit it, and then write it and promote it. So we initially started off by posting, a few times a week, up to 5 times a week, actually almost every single day, which is, in our professional lives and with busy personal lives as well, it's just not sustainable. And we kind of over time started testing how, one, our content was being engaged with on a daily/weekly basis. And then based on that, and again, based on likes, comments, views, and then also our own sort of personal and professional life balance, we've kind of understood that our sweet spot is at about 2 to 3 times a week, weekdays. And it's constantly just coming back to analyzing our, who's consuming it and how they're consuming our content. And like you said, with constant content creation, it can burn you out and be tedious. So we have to constantly, and I encourage this to everybody, look at what you're posting and how it affects you too, because it's not worth posting too much if you don't believe in the content or if you're not creating it with the same passion. So even if it's posting once a week, that's better than posting 3-4 times a week of lackluster sort of content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with
any productivity hacks? I'll hop over to Mira. So you're mentioning this balance stuff, but anything that's been helping you guys organize a little bit more effectively?
Definitely. So we're both fairly type A, I would say. So we're fairly organized to begin with in terms of, what we're going to post on. So we kind of, we discuss it ahead of time. Just kind of like, this week, here's what we're going to do. Like, I'm going to create something about this. You're going to create something about this. And we sort of have that. So we already know what we're doing. And it's not a last minute thing, so that we can create the time for it. And then the other thing that we do is some things. So for example, on both, I believe on TikTok as well, but on Instagram is where we usually start to make something. You can download the video that you have created before you add words to it. This is just like once you start doing it, you can see the hack. It's very easy. Where let's say you're creating a video. So for example, created a video on how sleep affects pain, and it takes time to create a video where you're like in bed and you're throwing off the covers, and it takes more work to create a video like that versus just speaking some words. And to create that, I downloaded the video before I added any words to it, so then I can reuse the video several months later with different statistics or different information in that same video. So that's something that you can do to make your life a little easier. When we first started, we were creating an original video 5 days a week, and that was a lot of work and really unnecessary until we learned that you can just download your video and then add content later. And so that's definitely one.
So repurposing is really effective. So and I think I've heard Gary Vee, who's a really big entrepreneur, talk about this as well. But one of his hacks, he talks about this a lot, is just doing, and this is what a podcast is, by the way, it's a long form piece of content that you can then repurpose to chunk into smaller sections. So I often think about, and just kind of to your point with the video, I often think about the podcast and even what we're recording as long form content, which then we can go ahead and just chunk this into 1 minute bites. Right. Or you have that video with maybe some great footage of something, and then it's, you pointing out something, and then you can just change the text to repurpose that, or change the music, or so on and so forth. And also, to that point, if you have a video or a piece of content that really hits, there's nothing really stopping you from reposting it 6 months later or something, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even with what you were mentioning with the podcast and taking small bites, we use a program where you essentially can take a little clip from your audio and post that as a content. And so we do that as well. We take little small clips from our actual podcast and post it on there, and then also directing everyone to a link to where you can hear the rest of it. So you can also do that, because you are doing this in order to drive more people to listen to your podcast.
Yeah, I'm curious often, and this is just me putting on the rational hat. I'm really curious because I don't 100% know if I'm the consumer of all things podcast, and I am to a certain extent, but I don't know how you guys are. Do you guys? I'm just interested, actually. When you guys are scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or any of these things, when you see one of those audiograms and you see a podcast, do you guys listen to it?
So that's a really interesting question, because I think that's one of the reasons personally I was inspired to do a podcast, because I did, not all of them, but I think they had to be, one, visually appealing, because audiograms come in many different sort of forms, right? They can be graphic, they can just be graphics with a picture, whatever it may be. But I think it depended on, one, the visual sort of hook, as well as the content that was being promoted. But I personally do, especially on Instagram, I think is where it's more visually sort of catching.
Yeah.
And Mira, how about you? Yeah, same.
Yeah, I have as well.
And the reason I bring up that question is I think a really good barometer sometimes is, if you're not 100% sure if something's good, you might want to ask yourself, wait a second, would I actually listen to this, or would I stop for a second? And sometimes that happens to me, where I produce something and I put it out and I'm like, this isn't good. I wouldn't even watch this, I wouldn't even watch myself. So I think sometimes having that sort of directness or feedback with yourself is really helpful. So if you guys were starting again, okay, I want this question to really be more so for the beginners. Okay. Starting a podcast is already super daunting. And then on top of that, we're telling you basically that's not enough. You got to be able to, go on Twitter and Instagram and all this other stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how do we frame this for the beginner? How would you sort of teach someone, okay, you're about to start your podcast journey, there's other aspects to it. What are you going to tell them? And I guess, Mira, we'll start with you.
I would tell them, for one, to, even before you launch your podcast, start your social media. Start that early. So start posting on social media, get everyone interested, post some of the content that you would be speaking about in your podcast. Start that early. And then to kind of learn a lot of these hacks that we're mentioning, to learn those ahead of time so that you can make your life easy later on. But I definitely think that starting on social media early is the way to go, rather than launching your entire podcast and then trying to catch up to get everyone engaged to listen to it. Because I think you have more engagement when you are getting everyone interested or excited for an episode to be released, and then you release the episode, rather than the other way around, where you've released like 11 episodes or 12 episodes at once, and now you want everyone to sort of like listen to all of them. So I think starting early is the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Alope?
I completely agree with Mira in terms of starting early, as well as two other things that I would add. One, to plan and prepare. I have everything in my life on Google Docs, as Mira knows. It's always like, let's create a Google Doc for that. Whatever works for you, but plan and prepare. Oftentimes you'll come across ideas, and if you don't write it down or something, it's a great idea that you may forget, or a way to hack something or a tip. So really prepare. And then two, outsource. As physicians and type A personalities, like Mira mentioned, we learned over time that we don't have to do everything. Oftentimes for the sake of our mental health, but also for the sake of productivity as well, really investing our time in something else that's more productive, it's best to outsource. And as physicians, we don't have to do everything when it comes to editing your podcast, even uploading or promoting. If you can have a virtual assistant, or an editing person, that would be great. So outsource when possible or necessary, and then also prepare as much as you can beforehand to really save your energy and time.
Yeah, I mean, I can't highlight what you said enough, because I think what happens, especially for physicians or health professionals, or even a CEO or leader, is often these types of personalities take everything on, and to sort of systematize things and like know where different pieces go, and then maybe outsource, like you're saying, for some of the less fun tasks. Like for me, editing and all that stuff, I can do it and I'm great at it, but it's just so tedious. Like it really is. And I think that is a valuable task that someone should be paid for. And on top of it, it's a win for you because you save time. So yeah, I couldn't asterisk or underline or underscore that enough for sure. And what do you guys think about, and this is the other thing, and part of the reasons we're doing this, about mentorship and about, having a coach, or like, have you guys used a coach or had a mentor, or do you recommend that in terms of podcasting for this type of stuff?
That is also a very interesting question, because we never really considered it initially. I think we took on a lot of the work ourselves. We coached each other. It's great having a partner or a co-host, because one, you can share the work, but two, you can also keep each other going. And we definitely had areas where, one of us has our strengths, or times that we both were kind of struggling or lagging behind. So having a partner is great. We work very well together, so we were very good in that sense. We did ask questions a lot to other podcasters. We used other platforms like Facebook, which has groups, which is great. So we used the Physician Podcasting Network group on Facebook. We reached out to other people that had podcasts and just said, hey, any tips on this, any suggestions? And then we continued on. So it's really good that you're doing this, because I wish we had this when we were starting. So just asking questions is great. And then if we had known that there were podcasting coaches, I think we would have definitely used them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And, we're heading up on time right now. So I just want to say that I can't thank you guys enough for taking your time out. I know we're all super busy, and it's great to meet you two. I'm sure we're going to hop on plenty of these streams and chat about plenty of topics in the future. But for the sake of time, Mira, I guess I'll ask you, how can people find your platform? How can people reach out to you?
So our podcast is called The Hurt by the Female Pain Docs, and it is available on a multitude of platforms. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, Google, Pandora. So there's multiple ways to reach us through there. And then we also have a website, which is www.thefemalepaindocs.com, which also has links to all of these. And then lastly, we also have links to our podcast and to reach us in general on Instagram, where we are at The Female Pain Docs. So those are probably the easiest ways to reach us. And there's we're very accessible. So there's multiple ways to reach us and listen to us.
Awesome. And those links will be on the Doctors on Social Media website. Feel free. I'll also put them on the comments section of the posts for everything on this. Definitely listen to these podcasts, especially if you are in the audience or you're dealing with pain. I'm sure there's going to be really valuable information for all of that. So again, thank you 1,000 times, seriously. And I can't wait to see you guys and in the future and all your content. And hopefully we'll hop on for some more things.
Thank you for organizing this. This is great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, take care.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right, guys. So that is our first section of this episode and show for today. But now I'm going to head into section 2, where I'm going to drop some of my personal gems on this topic. Before we get to that, again, with everything we just said, there's a lot to do with podcasting. But let's say that you've listened to this or you're listening to this content and you're like, this is still too much for me. Okay. This is too much work, or I just don't know if I can handle this. That's why we have a Build a Podcast service where I personally, alongside doctors on social media, we're going to coach you. We're going to teach you. We're going to get you through this thing. We'll get you to launch. If you want additional coaching services afterwards, we can do that. So if you just listen to all of this, and you're like, that's too much, or you're not sure how to do it, or you want some help, that's where the Build a Podcast service is going to come in. So again, I just want to highlight that, and that there's many other courses on SoMeDocs. That's the reason Doctors on Social Media is here. It's for connecting, networking, building foundational skills that can be super helpful for people. So here are my thoughts on teaching this concept of building engaging media. So the first thing I just want to say is this is all derivative media. So you create a podcast, and that podcast is the long form content. So anything that you post on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, so on and so forth on these social medias, this is derivative. So you can take that long form and you can be inspired by short pieces. So let's say, for example, you have a guest, and that guest has this moment where they say something really special or authentic or unique. You can take that piece and use it on any platform. You can highlight it. Let's say that you have a comment from a listener that was really awesome that you want to highlight or share. You can take that as a derivative or piece of the content. If you have a piece of content that's super engaging and people are loving it, right? They just can't, they're loving this piece of content. You can reuse it. So remember, everything is repurposable. Everything is derivative off of the initial. There's no reason for you not to remix your content. So remember, when it comes to creating engaging media, figure out what's engaging and use that a bunch of times, because that'll be helpful for social media. Okay. And this kind of heads over to clips and highlights. Take clips, take highlights, take sections of the episode that were really interesting, engaging, parts that you thought were amazing. Maybe you have another listener, you have a friend or family member that listens to your podcast, and they're like, oh my gosh, I loved minute 15 of this conversation. Use those pieces, use those highlights, use those clips, use the testimonials, the comments, the feedback, use that to your advantage. Is your audience hanging out on Twitter? If you get a lot of engagement on Twitter, you use Twitter and you're tweeting and you notice that, you really want to maybe take those small bits or pieces, use quotes from the conversations, use little audiograms that you can post in, find out what's engaging on Twitter and reuse it. Hashtag, retweet, comment, hop into other hashtag groups with a similar topic, make friends, follow people, get your followership up. That way, when you post stuff, people will like, comment, and retweet, right? So these metrics are ways that we have to engage on Twitter. Instagram, it's going to be all about your images, your videos, making sure things are engaging, authentic, making sure you have good energy on those posts. You can use audiograms, and I'll get to that in a bit. These are clips from your episode you can put straight into Instagram, and people can engage with that. But the big thing that was also highlighted by Mira and Elope is the fact that the media needs to be engaging enough that someone would interact with it, right? So try to create things on Instagram that are either authentic, interesting, quick, snappy. Try to find maybe a question that you can ask people so they can comment on it. Try to get people engaged, because in terms of the algorithm, it is about likes and comments and all that stuff. They mentioned reels, which are these short clips. So don't be afraid to make short clips that you post on the Instagram like page itself. Don't be afraid to use reels where you're posting these short clips. Don't be afraid to create posts on stories where you tag to the original post. So use all of these things to your advantage, especially when you're up and coming and you're starting to get your followership. It's going to be important to creating that engaging material. And again, guys, these are their own separate topics. I'm just trying to highlight some of the things that we want to think about. Facebook is interesting. The algorithm is a little bit more on the difficult side, but the biggest thing, it always comes down to being authentic, having a good script, meaning having a story or a post that is meaningful, something that's going to engage, usually a nice photo or a video or something to engage or pull people in. Having a nice hook is going to be helpful to making that engaging. Specifically to the podcast, having a clip of the episode or having the audiogram with some nice text, bringing people back to the podcast. But again, it needs to be authentic. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be something real. You want to be authentically excited about the stuff you're creating within your podcast so that when you share it, people understand that authenticity. With me saying this in mind, I want to mention people often have a hard time with self-promotion, and that can be uncomfortable with people. Instead of thinking of it like self-promotion, think of it like highlighting the guest you had on, highlighting the content. Like, this was a really great part of this conversation. I think it'll be really valuable. I know it impacted me a lot. If it comes from a real place, people are more likely to engage with it. And don't be discouraged if it doesn't get traction right away. That's why it's trial and error, right? There is no perfection. It's just a process. LinkedIn's a little bit more on the professional side, but remember to link it back or use these links, these posts, these comments to engage with your network. Why would this section of content be useful for members of your network? Try to link it back to your audience so that then they can come back and take a listen. So LinkedIn's similar to Facebook. Have a good script, have something that's engaging, have that energy, have that authenticity. And again, this sounds like a chore, which is why I'm going to get to, it could sound like a chore, which is why I'm going to get to some managing techniques here. TikTok is short. It's quick. It's engaging. It's trendy. Okay. So the only way to really get on the train, so to speak, is to hop onto the trends, make it interesting, throw it into whatever it is that you do. If TikTok's not your medium, that's fine. But you got to remember that if you're trying to reach younger, teens, kids, all that stuff, your audience might live on TikTok. So with all of these things in mind, remember to think about where your audience lives. That's going to influence how you're going to engage with your media, and it's going to be really important. One of the considerations is, okay, this is a lot of stuff. I can't handle this. That's why if you do have a little bit more income or you're a higher level of earner, you could have a social media manager that deals with all this stuff and helps create content for you guys. But remember, if people are listening to you on the podcast, they want to see you, they want to see your co-host, they want to see your, so these are things to consider. But if it is a lot, you can have a manager and you just outsource a lot of this stuff. So remember, that's not a bad thing if you want to do that. Make sure to keep things simple and consistent. So don't try to get too fancy too quick. It's better to be consistent in your approach, releasing content over time, going on Facebook, Twitter, making short posts here and there. Do it on your time. Make it easy for you. Keep it simple. Don't go crazy right away. Figure out what people like and what they don't like. Find content that you like and figure out why it's engaging. Learn over time and make it a process so it doesn't have to be so scary, and you'll get better over time. Those are my biggest tips on that. Get your community involved and super fans. Do you have any fans that absolutely love your show? Do you have a super fan? Do you know some fans that are reaching out to you through email? Ask them if they can help you with your content. Ask them if they can help engage on your team. You can get people to help volunteer-wise to help you with this stuff. You don't have to pay people sometimes. I'll give you an example. One of my really good friends now, Neil, was a listener of my podcast when I was like 4 or 5 episodes in, and now he helps me with crazy amounts of stuff, and we work together on stuff all the time. So remember, you're not alone. When you build a podcast, when you create your social media, you have a community. So maybe these members can help you. So don't be afraid to ask for help. People are more than willing to help. Come up with agreements. Maybe there's a payment, maybe there's not. Just figure it out. Figure it out as a team. There's paperwork to do this. But really, it's not as complicated. If you have people that love you, like, they love you for a reason. They want to engage with your community. There's tools like Hootsuite and Buffer and other tools that you can use to manage your stuff ahead of time. So if you want to batch your work, if you want to batch your content so it goes out to LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, you can use things like Hootsuite or Buffer or any of these other online tools to manage your social media. You don't have to make it hard on yourself. So if you want a holistic approach to launching certain social media posts, use these tools to your advantage. Adobe Premiere Rush, Headliner. There's some other tools out there that create audiograms for you. Audiograms are just nice little video clips that are a highlight you take from a section of the audio, and you can make clips using these types of tools. Headliner is super streamlined. And so let's say we do a long form content like this, and now I want to make this an audiogram. I can go to Headliner and I can essentially create a little audio clip. It's an audio clip. There's different bars for like the length of time, and you can make it really engaging using really simple tools. So it doesn't have to be complicated. If you know the tools and you use them properly, you can launch this stuff. So I hope I've demystified and reduced some of the anxiety and the stress on this. There's so much more to be said, but those are my gems for today's episode of the series on doctors on social media teaching podcasting. So guys, thank you so much for watching today. I sincerely appreciate it. We're going to come back with some more, and I can't wait for you guys to check out the next ones. Take care, everyone. Have an amazing day, and I hope you got something out of this episode.